Hi guys, this is Dylan, and I was going to post what I had made for part 2 a couple days ago, but I decided to re-record it as I missed some important points I wanted to make, and I just feel like I could do better, so I'm going to try again. I haven't really found a great time to do this. I'm in a really triggered space right now, largely because this really creepy security guy rousted me and my husband last night, and he stood there and he watched us, staring at us just in the creepiest sort of way the whole time, which they don't usually do. They usually tell us to go and then leave us be. But this guy, he insisted on watching us pack up our stuff and was just outrageously creepy. So it really set me off, and I've been struggling with trauma being triggered as a result of that. So, anyways, what I want to talk in this video about is, first and foremost, addiction and how addicts and people who are perceived as addicts on the street are treated, and how people do not want to give to those of us they perceive that way, and why that's total bullshit. So here we go. First of all, I'm going to start with the fact that I have been clean off of my addictions for 6 years now. I just smoke weed, and I would take psychedelics, but I rarely ever happen across ones that I trust. And after my last experience with one being super negative, the only one in my 6 years of recovery, I am leaving that whole thing alone. So I just smoke weed right now, and so does my husband. He's on methadone, but otherwise he just smokes weed. So I come from the perspective of someone who was an addict on the street and then got clean and remained in and out of homelessness due to disability. My husband's story is the same. So I feel like I have kind of an interesting perspective to share. I am still perceived as an addict by most people, I am sure. And it seems like most people are unable to actually comprehend that you can be homeless and not be an addict. So I suppose we should start with that point. Not everybody who's out here is an addict. Some of us have been and then got clean and then we're still homeless for whatever reason. Others of us never were. There are many reasons to be homeless. Addiction is only one piece of it, and a lot of us were not even addicts to start with, who did become addicts, but a lot of us became addicts on the street because of how painful it is out here. So that's one thing I want to make a big point about, is that a lot of people treat addiction like it's a moral issue and like it's not about what it's really about, which is always coping with pain. People use to cope with pain. Just like people who have more privilege can go to doctors and often get pain medication like oxycodone or hydrocodone or things like that, or benzodiazepines, in order to cope with their pain. And likewise, they go out and drink alcohol. Those of us who don't have the privilege to do those things so much in a higher society type of way, have to do the same things just on the street, and from a place of having less. And I don't see a difference there, but most people seem to. Most people seem to think that when well-off people drink and use, that it's pain management, but that when poor people drink and use, it's a moral problem. And that is because of something called classism and ableism. And if you don't know what those terms are, I would highly recommend looking them up. This brings me to a huge point I want to make. A lot of people, they don't want to give to people on the street because they're afraid of funding our addictions. If you ever give money to the system, here I'm speaking as someone in the United States, thinking of Americans when I'm saying this, but it's true all over the world, in so many places. if you give to the system, definitely in the United States, in any way, shape, or form, if you pay taxes, if you shop at chain grocery stores, if you support the music industry, the movie industry, if you watch television, if you watch a lot of what's here on YouTube, you are supporting drug addicts. The people at the top are almost exclusively addicts. I grew up in MK mind control, in an aristocratic family. They had outrageous quantities of money and political power, and they were the most drug-addicted people that I've encountered. In fact, they weren't just drug addicts, they were drug traffickers. So if you support the system at all, you are supporting high-level drug traffickers. And you're not just supporting their personal addictions, you are supporting the illegal drug trade and the legal drug trade. They aren't really so separate. You're supporting them deeply. So the question really is what side of it do you want to support? Do you want to support the people at the very bottom who are struggling the most against it, who are trying every day to survive in the face of being all but totally exterminated by this system? Or do you want to support the people doing the exterminating? I'm not trying to put people in a double bind here, but I'm trying to be real and say that there really is no way to participate in this society without funding drug addicts and drug addiction in some way. And so I feel like the question really does come down to what side of it do you want to be putting your energies towards? Do you want to put your energy towards helping people who are destitute, who are in desperate need? Or do you want to put your energies towards furthering the excess that people up towards the top are already drowning themselves in? A lot of people seem to think that addicts on the street have a nice, happy time out here. That because they don't have to work, as if a lot of them don't, when many homeless people do have jobs and do work in various ways, and as if a lot of homeless people have a choice about it. You know, so many of us, including myself, would love to work, but cannot work conventional jobs, if at all. And the idea that we're having a nice, easy time because we don't have to work and being a street addict is easy is crazy. It's really not how it is at all. I'm sorry if I insult anyone by suggesting that they're crazy, but that idea is crazy. It really is. Few things are harder than being out here and being addicted. Being out here at all is unbearably difficult. It's unbearably difficult for me out here not using, in large part because of how much people perceive me in this way. So another huge point that I want to make is, addiction, drugs, it's a way of coping with pain. And not everybody has all the same coping tools. If you've had a difficult life, one that could have landed you on the street or maybe even did, but you didn't turn to substances to cope, then that suggests that you had some other way of coping. And I think it's really important as an exercise in empathy to reflect on how maybe not everybody has access to the same coping tools you do. I know for me, substances were a way of coping for many years. And this brings me to another point. Something about my story is that it was not my choice. I was born addicted in MK child trafficking, and I was raised on substances. And when I was a teenager, I actually had to make a choice. If I wanted to get out of the situation I was in, I had to start spending more time on the street, away from my family, doing crime on a street level, selling drugs, selling myself, which of course I was being trafficked, so I was being forced to do these things. It's not like I was actually committing crimes. These are crimes that were being done to me. But I was forced to take it into my own hands a bit more and to invest more of myself in what I did for my abusers as a way of gaining some autonomy. And so I developed an identity as a hustler, one that was more conscious, and I started really putting myself into those activities and into my own drug use in an attempt to take on more trauma and then subsequently medicate that trauma as I struggled with coping with it, and also in an attempt to kind of confuse my abusers into thinking that I had gone off the rails and I was no longer either a particularly useful slave to them on a higher level or much of a threat. You know, I made them feel like I was going to burn myself out. And so in an attempt to hide myself from predators, in a way, in an attempt to make predators feel like I wasn't a threat, I drowned myself in substances harder than ever before. This ended up making it possible for me to actually get out of the situation I was in, to get clean off of drugs and alcohol at the age of 17. And while I am still homeless, you know, I've been homeless on and off since then, and it looks like I'm going to be homeless for a long time now, probably, for the indefinite future. I have a much better life. I largely have a much better life because for a while, when I needed to, for my coping and for my safety, I had to do a lot of serious drugs. So my point is that I'm an example of someone who did not choose to become addicted, who was forced into it, and then when they did start taking it into their hands a little bit more, it was still because they did not have another choice. And it made it possible for this person, you see here, to actually get clean, to preserve themselves, to stay alive long enough to make it to adulthood and to get clean. And I think that's a huge thing, is that a lot of people, they presume that everybody out here has chosen this. They presume that everybody out here had better choices if they did choose it. And they presume that using to stay alive because you can't do anything better in the moment isn't worth doing. But there are a lot of people who find themselves faced with so much pain and with so much pressure in a lot of cases to use that it's a choice between committing suicide, being killed by one's own family, not having the support of family and friends in a way that would still lead to someone being destitute, perhaps in ways that they simply could not cope with, even further than if they were to use and be destitute in some way. There are people that there are all sorts of reasons why this is the best that they can do, and it really is a choice for a lot of people between this or death. And I think it's really disgusting that people who are in that position are treated as if they have better choices when they didn't, and as if them trying to stay alive while addicts isn't worth doing. If somebody needs to use for a while in order to survive so that they can get to a point where they can get sober, then I believe that it is more abled people's responsibilities to help them stay alive in order to get to that point. A lot of people have this mentality that addicts could just quit anytime that they want to. I feel like a lot of this is a projection from people who have their own problems with addictions, whether they're substances or not, as that's a line that addicts often use about themselves. Oh, I could stop anytime I want. When people say that to other addicts, I figure they are themselves in some way an addict. But that's slightly beside the point I was trying to make. What I'm trying to say is, a lot of people out here, they want to stop using, but they're not being offered options to do it safely and healthily. My husband, he's on methadone, and that's one of the only options that people have for getting clean, even remotely safely, is going to a clinic where they can get a dose of this opiate called methadone. If they were addicted to opiates already, they can get this and they can take it some places at least for free, legally. The thing is that, as far as I understand, it's actually a more serious opiate than heroin. It's significantly harder to get off of, and in many ways it's more damaging to the body. The people who run the clinics are often cruel and abusive. Some of the abuse is really underhanded and involves a lot of gaslighting aimed at keeping people who are trapped in cycles of addiction addicted to methadone so that they can then make a profit off of that. There's a lot wrong with that industry. It's really just legal drug dealing and trafficking. And while some of the people who work in those places may mean well and may do a lot to help others in some way, it's still a fundamentally corrupt and broken system. And there are a lot of reasons why addicts don't feel safe going to places like that, or they do go to them and they make their lives worse. And while I'm not saying that methadone is never an option for anyone that they should take, my husband calls it the worst mistake that he made. It's not totally black and white. It's still really fucked up, and it's one of the better options that a lot of addicts have. Going cold turkey off of certain substances can kill a person. Even going cold turkey off of substances like meth, where the withdrawal won't necessarily kill you, the depression can be so outrageously severe that can kill a person. People commit suicide coming off of that substance. And most people don't get clean because it's just too much. And I think that if there was a culture of acceptance, if we didn't criminalize this stuff, if we didn't leave people to go to jails and institutions, if we actually gave people an opportunity to really develop better coping tools without shame, because shame really is the core of this for so many people. Yes, it is about medicating pain, but a lot of that pain is often shame to begin with. And fueling people's shame by telling them to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and to get clean without assistance is absolutely the best way to ensure that people are going to stay addicted and stay dying in the streets. So those are some reasons why I think that it's important to support addicts on the street and to not just, one, assume we are all addicts, but to also not assume that we don't deserve help. To also not assume that wherever you are putting your money is a better place and isn't directly going into the hands of people who are creating these problems for real. Because I want to be really clear that street addicts are not creating these problems. The problem lies in the hands, first and foremost, of drug traffickers. And no, those drug traffickers are not like, at least I know many white Americans believe, a bunch of brown people from south of the border. They are, for the most part, in this country, white people working for organizations like the CIA, which I grew up in. I can testify from the deepest of personal experience that the majority of the power here in that way is white and wealthy and within the United States and Europe. And there is a lot being done militaristically. If you look at what's happening in the Middle East, and you look at how many wars have been waged there, it's not about saving people in the Middle East. It's about pillaging. It's about pillaging the land for oil and opiates, among other things. Those are the main ones, though, pretty much, as far as I know, from my experience in that place. Opiates and oil. So if we're talking about the drug industry and who's controlling this stuff, if you just follow the military activities of countries like the United States in areas like the Middle East, it becomes pretty apparent pretty quickly where the power is and who's responsible for what's going on here in the United States. So I know I'm speaking largely to Americans, but a lot of this stuff is universal. I think there are people in other countries who are going to find a lot of what I'm saying to be applicable. So, anyways, I want to, now that I've said all this, I want to provide some suggestions for how people can help addicts on the street. And for how people can help people on the street who might be addicts without necessarily assuming that we're addicts, because I think that's really important. It's not always obvious. A lot of people would assume that I am a tweaker because of the way I look and the fact that I'm homeless. But like I said, I have not used that in years. So this is a really basic one. So a lot of people act like when you're out here, there's no reason to give you money because all you need is food, or you can just get everything from a charity or a shelter. And a lot of people think that they should just be donating to those places directly. And before I go on a huge thing, I want to try and remember my purpose here. I'm trying to give really specific suggestions now. But I will say about charities, they're almost all MK run and abusive. And even if there are good people working there, just like the methadone clinics, there's so much corruption, so much abuse. I was talking to someone the other day who was telling me that he won't stay in a shelter in the town where I'm at right now. He won't stay in the shelter here because the staff, as well as some of the other street folk, but largely the staff, rob you of your belongings. That happens a lot. And there's so much embezzling. There's so much abuse. It's really ugly. There's a lot of reasons why people don't feel comfortable staying in these places or getting assistance from them. A huge one is religion. A lot of the places push religion on people. And even if you're a Christian, if you've never been in one of those places, I challenge you to go to them and to find the way that they preach at the homeless to be Christ-like. I think you might be very surprised to find out how unchristianly a lot of the so-called Christianity is in those places, or how unchristian it is. But anyways, a lot of people seem to think that they can just give to those places and it will help people more than it will. The fact is that because a lot of those places are abusive, people on the street are extremely dependent on everyday people in the public to directly give us things, be it money or otherwise. And a lot of us need, of course, money in itself isn't really worth much of anything unless you're being exploited and you have to give that money directly to an exploiter. Money in itself isn't really worth much, it's what you can get for it. So yes, we all need stuff. We don't necessarily just need cash. However, a lot of people, they give us food and they presume to know what kind of food we need. But a lot of us have allergies, or a lot of us can only eat very specific things. A lot of us, those of us who are addicts, specifically struggle with the fact that depending on where they're at with their cycle of addiction, depending on if they're high or if they're sick, how they're feeling, different kinds of foods may or may not sit well. Different kinds of foods, they might not be able to chew them, might not be able to keep them down, and they might not have any idea what kind of food they're going to be able to eat until they get well next, until they drink or use whatever their substance is, and are at that right place in that right moment. A lot of people also, because of their addictions or mental health problems, or because of abusive people who are on the street who take things from them, they only feel comfortable taking things that they can use in that exact moment. They're likely to lose them in some way if they don't. Sorry, I have to keep adjusting my hair. I'm autistic and it makes sensory stuff. It's a thing. There's a lot of reasons why people, they only want to take things that they're going to use in that very moment. And if they do take it and they lose it, it just hurts them. It hurts them more. So a lot of times people will not take food when offered it in the moment, for all the reasons, for any of the reasons I just said. A lot of times they don't trust it also. In part one of this, I talked about people, housed people burning homeless people through burning chemicals in trash cans, and through putting corrosive substances to bags and pretending that they're real drugs in order to sadistically torment homeless people. People do those kinds of things to food too. And I'm not saying I've experienced this much myself, but I know it happens, and I know that people have every reason to distrust what they're given by people who have more. A lot of people will even look at me with distrust when I go to give them food. And I'm also homeless, but sometimes I don't have my pack on, and they can tell that I'm kind of dirty and probably on the street too, but they're not entirely sure, and they don't feel very comfortable. So the level of distrust wildly increases as you move out of the lower classes. So there's just a lot of reasons why people are distrustful to accept material things, including food, or why they just don't feel like it's the right thing in the moment. There are people who are diabetic who can't accept sugar, and so if you go to give them anything with sugar, they're not going to be able to take it. There are also people, a lot of junkies and alcoholics specifically. I'm not saying it's all just junkies and alcoholics, but it's specifically a thing for that. People who can only eat like maybe one or two foods, like they can only eat cereal, or they can only drink smoothies or something without being really ill. And so it's really important that people be given a choice. If you do only feel comfortable getting food for someone, I recommend asking them if they want you to get some food for them and what they might want. I also recommend making sure that when you do that, if possible, you are already close to a grocery store. I'm not saying if you find someone further away, don't help them, but a big piece of why it can be hard to help homeless people on the street is, on a street level, is that we're often in a very kind of there's so much that we have to do to take care of ourselves, whether we're addicts or not, that it can be really difficult for us to wait anywhere for any length of time. I know a lot of people have tried to give to people on the street, and if they ask them to wait somewhere for a while, they come back and they're gone and they get frustrated. That's part of being homeless. There's a lot to that. And I think that it's just important to really be respectful of people's time out here. Something that happens a lot when people go to help others on the street, especially when they're addicts, is that there's a presumption that we don't have anything to do, that our time isn't valuable, that we can just wait somewhere for an hour and it'll be fine. The thing is that actually we're probably some of the busiest people you'll ever find. Some of us don't do as much as others, but a lot of us almost never stop moving for safety and because everything takes so long. Just simply going to the bathroom could take 2 hours trying to find a place to go, and trying to walk around with all your stuff, and it's not always possible. Something else, if you really want to help addicts specifically, this is something that my husband has suggested, and I think it's a great one. If you have the money to give somebody, say, $10 or $20 or something, a round amount, that they can use to take to their dealer, as dealers usually like to receive money in amounts like that. And then on top of that, give them an odd amount of money, like $3 or $6 or something like that. Something that they could not so easily just hand to their dealer. It could encourage them to go and then buy something other than their bag. So if you give them, let's say, $14, they might take, maybe they have money already and that'll all go towards their bag, but maybe they don't have anything, and maybe that $10 will go straight to their dealer so they get well, and then that $4 will go to a sandwich, and then they can eat that right afterwards. Or alternatively, maybe you could give an amount like that, a whole amount, like $10 or $20, and then ask them if they want some food too. These are just ideas that may make it possible, if you really want to give to an addict, to see that they get a meal. These are things that could actually help them to get a meal. So Yeah, something else huge is that, a lot of people, they treat us on the street like we're erring children. Like we are little kids that have made poor choices and we need to have our lives be controlled. That we don't deserve to take control of our lives. However, a huge piece of addiction and trauma is a lack of control. Most of us on the street have been consistently disempowered, and we're in a state of extreme disempowerment most of the time out here. And when you treat us like we don't have a right to make choices for ourselves, you are suggesting to us the same things that are keeping us out here, the same beliefs you're reinforcing the same beliefs about ourselves and the same beliefs that we have about other people. I have a belief about other people that the majority of people, if given the opportunity, would take control over my life and seek to dominate me for their own personal gain or pleasure, even if it's just out of codependence, and that I can't trust them. And I don't believe that's false, but I do believe that people have an opportunity to change that for people like me a lot more, by actually treating us out here like we have a right to some autonomy. And a great way to do that, I think, is to give us some money without asking questions, without making judgments, and to suggest to us that we have a right to actually decide for ourselves what we spend it on. Okay, my video is probably going to time out soon, so I'm going to conclude this by saying that, as always, I do not ask for money on here. I do not accept money on here. I say none of this in an attempt to get anything for myself. I say all of this simply in an attempt to help the greater homeless community to flourish, to help people get off the street if that's what they want, and to help people to survive for another day with more comfort. I do believe everything I say will come back around to me in a positive way, but I say all of this out of love for my fellow brothers and sisters on the street, almost entirely out of love for fellow addicts specifically, and because I am in recovery, and for the addict self that I was when I was underage and on the street. I could not have been treated with more cruelty. Even though there were some people who were kind, I really couldn't have been treated worse. And I guess I'll end that on this note. If you abuse addicts on the street, you are probably at some point or another going to abuse children who are homeless. You're going to abuse people who aren't addicted, who you're failing to see as simply being disabled or living an alternative lifestyle. And you're going to abuse trafficking victims. And you're going to help push people who are being trafficked into the arms of abusers. And okay, that is the final point I want to make. If this video doesn't time out, I really want to say a huge point about all this is that when people are using on the street, they often have to do things they do not want to have to do in order to get their fix. They can't just quit. They need real support in order to do that. A lot of people just aren't there yet, and the support isn't there yet. And so they're going to use, and they're going to use in the safest way possible. But if nobody helps them that day,